gonna go live now. Somebody's watching it there somewhere.
Let me double check. Yeah, it looks like it. Yep, we're on. Okay, call to order the July or June special board meeting, Academie Lafayette Board of Directors meeting. Hope everybody's seen the agenda. I believe we have a quorum. I think we just need to approve the agenda as presented. And then, well, all right, yeah, let's go that way. So I need a motion to approve the agenda with the 3 agenda items.
So moved. This is Harriet.
Yep, we're on. Motion second. Call to order the somebody needs to mute June special. I don't like hearing meeting, Academie Lafayette Board of Directors meeting. Hope everybody's seen the agenda. Believe we have a quorum. There we go. Thank you. I need a second from somebody.
Second, Michelle.
All right, motion second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right. I don't think anybody signed up for stakeholder comments, did they?
No.
No, okay.
All right. Is Carlos here?
I don't think so. I didn't get any notice.
She is somewhere here. She came in. Yeah.
As presented. And then, yeah, somebody mute there. So I need a motion to approve. All right, that takes us to the last agenda item, the 2021-2022 school budget. Harriet and Jackie, the floor is yours.
This is Harriet.
Yep, we're on. Okay, second call to order the somebody needs to mute mute everybody, Mr. Bang. Hope everybody's seen the agenda. Please, we have a form.
Okay. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're ready to go, and Mr. Bang and I will we'll jump in. So it's been a rough week for all of us, as you know. Our colleague Peggy Aaron's passed away, and so it's been a really tough week, and we appreciate everybody's calls and extra support here at the school, and I know her family does also. So, you know, 1,300 kids aren't going to wait, and so we're going to go through the budget that we have prepared going into next year. And again, it's as good as the day we do it, and if there's any major changes, we know that we can do budget revisions going forward. But some of the slides I was discussing that we went through really diligently in March as a kind of a reminder and refresher on all of the rationale for budgeting and how we figure student attendance. We'll probably go through those pretty quickly. But you still hear me okay?
Please, one second. Okay. I need to go to no, 1 second. Okay. Because the computer is opening. The computer open. 1 second. I'm done. Good. Let's keep going.
Okay.
Because when I present, it's opening it on the how to say it, Apple browser. Okay. And I have to I have to go to that browser and mute it there. That's fine now. I think we're fine. All right. Let go.
As long as you don't mute me, then we'll keep moving. So, you know, our main responsibilities, Mr. Bang, you can go to the next slide too. Certainly, the board ensuring the necessary policies are in place to prevent fraud, and that we are accountable for our budget management. And we feel like we do that through our lengthy finance committee meetings each month, and our presentation, and providing the board with all of the information that we know of as it pertains to each month. Okay, the next one. So, you know, our school is funded with local, state, and federal funding. And this year, our budget projections are about a little over $16 million in revenue, with 77% of that coming from state and local funding, which is a little decrease from the years before, and that has a lot to do with the additional funds that we're getting from federal grants and ESSER. And a little bit of fundraising increase, a little bit over 7% of our expenditures. So we get about 2% of our revenue from other sources, Medicaid, student activities, those kinds of things. And the big thing to remember, after the $16 million, about 2/3 of it, of our budget actually goes to salaries and benefits. Okay, next. Now we're going to go over some revenue assumptions. So we can go to the next 2 slides. So the next one, yeah, there we go. So there are a few things that are a little bit different than last year. We had many more unknowns, but this year we believe that the change in basic formula to remove our hold harmless will continue. Prop C sales tax is about a little over $1,000 per pupil. We've budgeted about $1,025 to $1,047. And a thing to remember about Prop C is that it uses the previous years, this 2021 year's average daily attendance in that allocation. A huge increase in our federal ESSER funds, a fully funded formula, and increase in our grants. Some of the unknowns, again, is summer school attendance. So far, it's still really difficult, difficult to make that analysis too early, but it's really critical. And so that we have budgeted what we believed based upon enrollment. Re-enrollment, we're using our best estimate. There are still some applications pending, and with our transition, there are some applications that need to be updated, but we're still working on that. And then again, any unknowns and in-person disruption, don't even want to bring it up, but Mr. Bang did do the AMI plan, which is Alternative Methods of Instruction, that is required by DESE. So it is there and submitted in case we would have to do that. I was hoping that will not happen. And again, I don't think the KCPS MOU has not been totally finalized. So we're assuming that's going to happen, and that's how we calculated our basic formula also. Transportation was a little up in the air, and that means that because transportation funding is based upon the prior year usage and your number of miles and the number of riders, because we had such a disruption in last year, 2021, we just assumed our funding is going to be significantly decreased. Okay, next slide. We're not going to go over this, but this is the slide that talks about the impact of some of the funding that we received due to COVID, which really was very helpful. The CARES Act in various portions, the allocation was $190,000, then we spent all of that. And then as we moved into ESSER 2 allocations, we're projecting of the little over 400, we'll be carrying over about 250,000 of that into next year. And that our ESSER 3 allocation was updated on DESE's site last week, I believe, and it was a little over $1 million. And this provides this additional revenue for continuing our current levels of staffing, programs, and some additional learning loss interventions that Mr. Bang we can go over in a little bit, but we certainly put them into the budget. So if you go to the next slide, this kind of shows, and go to the next one, we know what the allowable activities are. So this summarizes what we've received, which is those first 4 items, the allocation that we have for ESSER 2, which is a little over 400,000, and what we believe what we've spent this year so far, and we still have some bills outstanding. So that may change a little bit, but we will get that reimbursed. Then the carryover of those funds we're estimating in this budget to be about 250,000. And then we put in the $1,074,000 from ESSER 3, noting that the requirement is a minimal 20% must be expended on student academic needs. And so that of that amount is about $215,000. One of the things that Mr. Bang spent some time on is certainly adding 2 teacher aides to both Oak and Cherry. This is in addition to interns. And then developing a team of teachers to implement some strategies for learning loss and data. So there would be some stipends involved and additional supplies. And this budget included about $50,000 to accommodate those 2 things. And as the committee and his ideas evolve, we may come back to the board with either an increase or a budget change, depending on what that committee believes is important to implement the success of helping with learning loss. Okay, the next slide. So instead of going to the very last page, here it is, right up front. We in this budget have a little over $16 million, a little over 15 for expenses, with a revenue over expenses of $442,000. We have debt service that needs to be paid from that amount, and leaves us about $26,800, which again is about a break-even budget for the 2nd year in a row. Our budget for this year was that we would be over by about $3,400. We vacillated, if you remember, during the fall with some terrible scenarios that could be a deficit of 900, then 700, and then once the hold harmless was removed, we squared away some of our attendance. Then it's about a little over 100,000 to the good. So, this budget year, with all of the changes and everything that happened, we're very pleased with the way it ended. In forecasting again. There are still, with the finance report the other day, we said about a little over $100,000 to the good, but we'll know here once we get June completely closed, because we do still owe some more pre-K payments now that we've squared up that attendance for the pre-K students. So the next slide is just not a lot of changes from several years. If you put the pie graph really next to each other over the several years, over 77% of our funding actually comes from basic formula and Prop C. Our grants are about 6%, which is a little increase. The federal funding is a big increase for us, about 12%, because of those ESSER funds and our CSP grant. We've decided that we're going to return to pre-pandemic levels for our estimates for fundraising and PTO, and I think that's fair. And again, if anything changes, we can go back and do some amendments. So this is where the major sources of our funding came from for this budget. Pretty familiar from years past. Okay, any questions? Okay. Next slide is the one we'll go through quickly. Just a reminder that we get our funding based on our state and local funding times our weighted ADA, and that means the weighted average daily attendance, which is our actual bodies and the number of hours they attend. And right now, until we get the results of our ELL WADA testing, we don't know if we'll get any weight for those students, but we do know that going into 21-22, the only weighted ADA that we added was for summer school. So you can go to the next one. Okay, so that shows our historical attendance. We're still doing 95%, assuming that we're back in buildings and we return to pre-pandemic issues, and that we will only have summer school weighted onto this next payment. Okay, next one. So using that, where we have number of students leaving throughout the year, school attrition, and adding what we believe is our weight for summer school, we're starting the year in the budget with about 1,314 students. And if you look at some other, and I know there may be things in your packet or things we've talked about, we might be off 2 or 3 students in other areas, but sometimes that's just a rounding. So this is really the number we're using, and a breakdown by Oak, Cherry, and Armor. Okay. Any questions on that weighted ADA? Okay. The next one, then we take that weighted ADA, and I think, yeah, I have 1306 on your slide. It should say 1,314 was our students. And at our basic formula, which again is flat for the third year in a row, that's about 11,164,556. From that gross number, then we take out the sponsor fee of 1.5%. And so what we put into the budget for our basic formula is a little over $11 million. Okay.
Are sponsor fees the same? Like no matter who's the sponsor, it's like a set thing?
I think so. Yeah, it's 1.5%. I think there is a cap, and they raised it last year. And honestly, I don't know what that is, but it's based upon, yeah, it's 1.5% of the basic formula, and there is a cap, but I don't think we're quite there yet. Yes. So yes, as far as I know, every sponsor from the statute is 1.5%. Okay. All right. Next. Okay. So this just kind of shows what's happened over the last couple of years. We've talked about this in finance meeting and in board presentations about how, for sure, in 2021, we lost more students in enrollment. We had a little more attrition during the year, which is also counted in there. And our average daily attendance then was under budget by about 64. But we were over in summer school last year, so that remote summer school really helped us. And going into the budget year of 21-22, we're estimating that the enrollment is that, and the weighted ADA is about 1,300. This is 1,313, so 1,314. So that's an increase of 93 students over the year. And this is where we get into the discussion with our attendance that we're still working on and finalizing for 2021, that some schools that don't have a lot of growth could choose the highest of the last 3 years of their weighted ADA for this year's payment. And because we again have another growth year of at least 100 students, that would definitely negatively impact us. So, okay, any questions there? Okay, just a graphic again showing that our budgeted weighted ADA last year, and then the yellow line showing the actual really is was a decrease there. Okay, the next one. But our historical enrollment and our weighted ADA, even with that, we show a growth pattern, and so we're doing that again for 21, 22, and even though it's not as significant as it has been in years past with an addition of 94 students, it's still really important that we look at that trend and continue to increase that weighted ADA, get closer to our budget that we had discussed, starting in our growth plan in 2016-ish. Okay, any questions there? Okay. The next thing we'll go into a little bit more about some of the hours that we spend. Let's go to the next one, Mr. Bang. Hours we spend just making assumptions and working with other staff and principals, and that is, again, a flat basic formula and Prop C using DESI memos and coming up with the dollar figure there. And again, that's based upon our weighted ADA for this year. So in our 5-year plan, that's a little under budget because of the decrease in the students this year. We also assume that we're filling all the caps in kindergarten and first grade. We're assuming attrition. There's a lot of formulas. If you had any time to look at the detailed budget that you got, it has all of these tabs, and it has real detail about how the attrition happens during the year and what the impact is for that on enrollment. Transportation, you may notice that the revenue was decreased by 50%. I bet there's a memo out there. If I had had time to read it, I'd be able to tell you exactly what that adjustment's going to be, and that may just come at a finance committee meeting, because I just know because of what happened during this year that will be decreased. This year, we didn't count on it. We had COVID relief funds, the ESSER 2 carryover, the ESSER 3, and again, particularly responsible that it is used for student achievement and learning loss. As I said before, I want to make sure everybody understands that those ESSER funds have, there are many possibilities for usage, but on this ESSER 3, at least 20%, or in our case, a little over 200,000, is going to be spent directly on student academic needs. And Mr. Bang's plan for the 2 aides at each building, the curriculum team, and it also built in some additional supplies. And that, again, could go up or down, but it's still within that ESSER 3 budget line item. Summer school, based upon the enrollment that we had, we've used 107 as our goal for our add-on to students. We're in person 5 days a week. We're really hoping, against hope, that plays out, because it's really important. Grants for next year that we know are a little over $1 million. And again, we're assuming that we're returning to pre-pandemic levels for fundraising, PTO activities. And then going into next year, we will continue with Seamless Summer program, which means that all the meals will be free, and we'll be communicating and addressing all those things with the parents. The problem on our end sometimes is, even though we talk about that, the usage goes up and down. And so we have, we're adjusting those meals on a daily basis. So those are some of the biggest impacts that we use and think about trying to look at revenue. Next one is just, again, I think so important to look at as we began the growth plan, and how important it is for fundraising and the support that we get to do the things that we have in our strategic plan and for students. And that, again, going into 21-22, it's almost $2.5 million. Well, actually more than that with the annual fund, in additional funding besides our basic formula and federal grants. Just dependent on continuing that. Okay, the next slide, expenditures. And again, how we as a team look at expense assumptions so that we can begin to do this budget planning. This year, our salaries are about $10 million, salaries and benefits. And we updated, you all voted to update the current salary scale to continue through year 35. We've updated our staff insurance and benefits and defined a base of $643 per month per employee last year, which we used for the 21-22 budget. Again, it's a little over 70% in salaries and benefits. We also, in all of our formulas, we assume a 2% increase in almost every expense line, except for those that we know absolutely are not going to do that, and then we make a manual adjustment there. But it also increases our expense based upon student growth. So there's some formulas in there, so that's how we look at our expenses. And the high school expenses, you may, if you had time to look at the detailed budget with all of the tabs, high school expenses allocated to the CSP grant are in there as approved. And then we continue to make some changes there when we're working with our program officer at the U.S. Department of Education. I've already talked about ESSER. We're really monitoring our PPE and expenses. As you know, we spent over $190,000 last year with the COVID relief money that we had, plus some GoFundMe from our wonderful community. And so going into this year, really looking at PPE and trying to analyze what we're really going to need and how to make it, how to make the environment safe and control our expenses. We've talked about transportation. This year, we believed, looking at the number of students with only an increase of 95 students year over year, that our budget of 19 buses will hold true in 21-22. if in March, I was very, very concerned about the liability insurance because we kept getting letters and reading articles about how significant liability increases were. And we did get hit with about a $12,000 increase, but that was offset with a decrease in our work comp. We switched carriers and got a better deal. So the fear that this was going to go up like 20 to 50% didn't happen, and this is not based upon our insurance usage by any means, but across the education sector and all of the issues that they've had with harassment and those kinds of things. So that was a really good relief because there was a potential that could have gone up much higher. And let's see, teaching resources, Mr. Bang was insisting that we go back to $600 for teachers. So they have $300 first semester, second semester. And again, that's for them to choose how they want to spend it with their classroom. That doesn't impact we still have other supplies, general supplies, textbooks, Chromebooks, those kinds of things in our line item budget too. We're assuming we budgeted for 10 interns, 5 at each building, and hoping that would go up as visa information becomes more available. Then we'll deal with that. And again, just a reminder that when we get allocations for like Title I and special ed, it only meets a portion of that program needed to implement. And in terms of special ed, it's only about 50% that we receive based upon what we actually need to provide to students. Any questions there? Okay, next slide. Again, if you held this up to last year, there's just a couple of changes in the pie chart. Mr. Bang, if you want to switch that next one to the next slide. So this is the categories of our expenditures, and if you look at the pie chart, it looks pretty similar. I think there's the change is in a couple of areas, but not significantly. Care and upkeep of our buildings is around 9%, and all of our other expenses all combined are 10%. And again, salary and benefits, teaching resources, the highest portion of our expenses. Some of those salary and benefits are included in the summer school expenses. Okay. Any questions there? Okay. So someone asked, we get 11 million, we're spending $10 million on our salaries and benefits. What is the snapshot of what's happening to non-salary related expenditures? And this is where we are really good stewards and really careful and strategic in our expenses after we cover 65% of the majority of expenses. And again, our staff recruitment is higher than other schools, moving expenses, about $4,000 more per employee for recruiting, and giving teachers the $600 per classroom is another thing that we do. I think yours might still say 300, but we increased that to $600. And it includes all software, online resources, our computer carts, and everything that has to do with learning in the classroom. Summer school is about 3% of our expenses, and if you think about that in terms of a 5 or 6 week program, where all of the effort, there's a lot of staffing, and it's about $500,000 worth of salary and benefits just during the summer for those 5 to 6 weeks. And transportation this year, we did a 3 mile again with only afternoon. I know it's painful for some people, but it also feels like, Mr. Bang, I think you need to be on the next one with the little snapshot. Again, transportation was a little painful, but in the summers we increased it to 3 mile radius and afternoon only, and tried to decrease the total expenses, trying to do more on-site field trips. Because of pre-pandemic, we're trying to go back to pre-pandemic, even though we're trying to cohort and provide a real robust summer school. Transportation still a huge portion of our expenses, and about $775,000 per year. And we're assuming a drastic cut in our revenue, which is typically only $150,000 anyway. So that is a huge operational effort on our budget to maintain those buses. Care and upkeep of our building is just, we really spent some time really going through every bill, electricity, all of the grounds and snow removal and all of the things that we did last year. And even though we had some savings because we weren't occupied all of those months, we really went through, and it's about 9% of our expenses. And again, none of that is capital. We still are deferring capital expenses. I do want to say that Mr. Bang and I've talked about this, and has encouraged me. We're working with MC to really come up with go back to, we used to have a wonderful spreadsheet, really look at our future capital needs going forward in a 5-year perspective. And so that's the next thing that we're working on. All other expenses, all combined, are about 13%, which includes our work comp and service area, community relations, our accounting, our databases for both finance and students, and then our staff recruitment costs, which again are more than our other charter schools. Okay, next one is a recap of actual detail from our budget. All of the main sources of revenue for this year and this year's budget. As you can see, those ESSER funds are really important to our success in meeting all the students' needs next year. And then next year is the second to last year for the School Smart expansion grant. And because of the way some of these grants, the way their fiscal year falls, we get more in one year than we do in another. And that's particular in that instance. And our rental income, and then all other receipts. So last year we budgeted about 14, so we've had an increase of almost $2 million. Any questions there? Okay. Next one. This is the more line item expenditures and salaries and benefits we already talked about, our summer school, how we break out facilities between Cherry and Oak and then our middle and high school, our transportation costs, and all of our other expenses, federal grant expenses. And the bottom line here is our actual expenses, like I said, about a little over 15 million, 15.5. We had a carryover of 442, and then we pay our debt service, and that leaves us 26,800, which is just a break-even budget. But the expenses in here are provided with 2.5% raises for staff, continuing the salary scale, increasing supplies, and increasing Title I aides and teachers' assistants from the ESSER funding. One I think is a good thing to look at is we started July 1 with an estimated operating cash of about 3.9 million, and then in this budget, revenue after our debt service and all of our estimating our unrestricted cash would be about $4 million. If you remember, in October, November, even through February, we were concerned that we would be using some of those reserves, and we didn't. And so this is a good way to start the new school year. And again, still working a lot on finalizing June and things that come up at the last minute that may impact that carryover, but still don't believe we'd be anywhere close to getting into the reserves. The next slide is just a recap of our debt service. Nothing new, doesn't change a lot. Principal's going up a little bit, 21, 22, not significant, but just shows you all of the loans and the outstanding debt and our total debt service that we budget into the 21-22 budget. Okay, next slide. Mr. Bang, you might want to talk about this. We don't have to spend a lot of time, but one of the things that Mr. Bang encouraged me and all of us to do was to really make sure that we are paying attention to our reserves. So when we were afraid and really looking in October through February, that we would have to get into our reserves to continue our program, continue to pay people, continue to do all of the things that were in the original budget, it was determined that yes, we probably could and should, and not cut any programs in order to continue to function, but that we should always keep in our mind, and as we go forward for our 5 years, et cetera, that we, no matter what we do, we always wanted to preserve that pre-pandemic reserves that we had going through into our 5-year. Did I capture that, Mr. Bang?
Yes, I just want to draw the attention of the board that prior to our expansion, our reserve was where 1.9 million, was $2 million, something like that. And because of our growth, we've raised fund and our reserve almost doubled. And then, and also because of our growth, we will be facing maybe 2 extra years of deficit at this point. So what I'm trying to say is that deficit is already raised, and when we're using reserve to in case we do it, to bridge that gap, it's a reserve that is a result of our growth and fundraising. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to say here. That of course, if you see the next 2 years might be not next year, but the following 2 years might show a deficit of maybe $1 million, but that $1 million is already raised or is already in our reserve. It doesn't mean we will have it because we don't know what's going to happen after that. The state, the fix the glitch bill may be passed, but as you know, every year we think that we're facing a deficit, but with the magic of Jackie, we ended up being in the black. I hope that it's going to continue like that. But no matter what, for that following 2 years deficit, I think the reserve, the doubling of our reserve is the result of the growth.
And we don't have it right now, but you received in your packet the budget, the 5-year projections, and I think it even goes a little farther than that. And so there is a deficit, as Mr. Banks said, for the next 2 successive years. However, we have not gone in line by line either, and it's again taking these formulas forward, right? So because of the decrease, I think in 2021 in students and having to back down on an enrollment this year, we need to do the same thing for the next couple of years. But what it did, so I think it did push out, we were planning on after next year, which we always thought was a little bit of a deficit, then the following year, once the new market tax credit was finished, then that's the year that we really started to show financial growth. And now I think because of the last couple of years, we've pushed that off to another couple of years.
Okay, that was my question, because my only big question was when I saw those deficits and I went back into the spreadsheet all the way back and was looking at numbers, I couldn't see if we had accounted yet for our losses of last year. And so you still need to take that into consideration as we move forward. Right. I mean, for the budgeting of 5 years out type situation.
Right. Well, what happens right now is all those formulas are doing the same thing. So it says next year we were going to add like 75 new students and we'll have to adjust those. And then we were going to have 2 new high school teachers, and that will be adjusted. Okay. So the formula is taking it out, and the one thing we did do is back out the revenue that was put into 22, 23, 23, 24, and increased it only slightly from the 8,500, because originally, you know, those fix the glitch was in there for 22, 23, I think. And so we did take that out. But yeah, going forward, we have a little more work we should do. But I think it's, yeah. So, okay, I think the next slide, Mr. Bang. And I think all this is doing some ins and outs and some activity to show where we're ended up with the estimated operating cash, where we thought was around 4 million going into this next year, which is a good thing. This is really helpful as we go forward, and so glad we can show that slide and not have it to having spent some of that just to get through this year. So. A lot of changes that happened, and ESSER funds and those kinds of things that certainly helped us get to this slide. Okay, the next one. I think we've talked about a lot of these, but some of the key takeaways, you know, our revenue and expenses we've already talked about, flat basic formula, grants and ESSER funds really helping us. The problem is, as we go forward, and that's what happens in those next 2 years, is that we're $350 less per pupil than we were with our 5-year projections when we started in, I think it was 2017, I think, that this year we would have been like at almost $9,000 per pupil, and we're not. And then again, on top of that, the growth projections that we didn't meet. So in our expenses, again, we were able to meet and give the raises, and we did not put anything we deferred payment to the endowment, which we can look at again now that we have those reserves, and that we, again, have a huge expense in our transportation. Okay. Expansion budget changes. Oh, so this is just, I was just going to go through that expansion really quick so you can see that we're about $300 and some down per pupil. And for the final budget, we have, we put in some staffing needs, and Mr. Bang is going to talk about the staffing needs.
Yeah, the staffing needs is because of the growth in K-5, we every year, as you know, we need 5 teachers. 5 French-speaking teachers. The next school year, we will need 0 English-speaking teachers in K-5. But also, we have decided to add 2 more paraprofessionals, 1 for each building. Previously, we had 1 paraprofessional. These paraprofessionals will be helping more in 1st grade and 2nd grade. We do not know if we will be having 1st grade interns. The Cherry Vice Principal has been hired. And in the high school, we will need less teachers than what we previously thought. So if you look at it, it's going to be 2.5 as opposed to what we said before, 3.5 new teachers. Because of the increase the number of our special ed students, we will need 2 additional full-time special ed teachers next coming year. And also we talk about digital communication instructional coach, that I would say IT, technology instructional coach, and digital communication. Increase interns to 10 at Oak and Cherry as host family identified. Remember also that we wanted to hire 14 interns, and we thought we'd be having host family issues, and we limited it to 10. We're trying to get additional interns from the French embassy. The problem we're facing is the restriction on the visa J1 and H1B coming from the Schengen space, meaning European Union. Our interns from the French embassy are not concerned by that, but the interns coming from Amity may be having issues to get the J1. So that's why we are trying to get 5 more from the French embassy. So those are our needs. The interns are not additional, by the way, because it's the same 10. We want to add another 4 to get 14, so that Oak and Cherry will have 2 each. Probably we will not be able to get those interns.
And my apologies for not, I don't think I got him the final slide after we discussed, because it's really 4 paraprofessionals. So we're adding 2 to Oak and 2 to Cherry. So that where it says 2, it's 2 at each. So that would be an additional 2 people.
Yeah.
And then, you know, through the wonderful process that we've gone through with Bellwether. And I know we haven't had time. I don't think you all did that on Saturday. I thought I listened to most of the day, but you know that we've continued some outsourcing in this structured budget that we're in this first budget, but there's also structures in there for transitioning and evaluating the transition and when and how to do those kinds of things that were recommended from the full on work that we had with Bellwether. So again, if there are changes that Mr. Bang and we can talk about in finance, if there are changes there, then there would be a budget amendment presented to the board. But I think some of the processes that we went through with Bellwether and some of the options and ideas are really going to take us to a stable future. And that may include moving some of the resources that are currently in this budget around and beginning that process of transitioning. So I just wanted to put that in there.
And Jackie, I will say I was really impressed. I had the opportunity to just hear briefly from Bellwether about their recommendations and the process they went through. And I think they have some very thoughtful suggestions that I don't know if that sort of recommendation starts in the finance committee and then we do a presentation to the board as to what that means, or how you recommend just informing the board of those recommendations. But I do think it would be really helpful.
Absolutely. We need to absolutely do that. You know, I think the word thoughtful at the beginning of that sentence is truly captures that whole process. And it was a little painful to begin with. I think Elamon and I, it was, you know, hours a week and, you know, got some dirty laundry and some things that we need to talk about. And it was very thoughtful. And, you know, I think that their experience and the way they reached out to other organizations our size to give us a focus was really helpful. You know, we think we do that. We think we've done it over the years, but having someone with that expertise to it provided, I think, some amazing things. And, you know, I think Mr. Bang said, well, a lot of this we knew, but, you know, processing it and maybe tweaking some of it too, and not just throwing staff at this and that, but how to again manipulate what's currently available and use it wisely. And they understand our finances in terms of our per pupil expenses compared to our cohorts in charter schools here and districts here is several $1,000s less. So we know that going into it, but I thought it was worth every minute of our time. And thank you to those of you who also spent time with them. It's greatly appreciated, because I think Mr. Bang has plans to do that with the board. So, you know, providing the recommendations, but then putting his stamp on it so that it fits really nicely into our culture. Any questions? You know, kind of quickly, not a whole lot of changes from our earlier renditions. Just add a little more information before. It's nice to do it at the end of the month too, because then we had even more information from Desi and some of our partners. So.
And I don't have any questions, just a thank you to you and to the whole team, continuing to sort of do such an amazing job with the budget all year round, and particularly in this last week that was just a hard week. So thank you for the time you continue to put into it, and everybody else on the team and on the finance committee. Yes, it is impressive to end the year, such a hard year that we anticipated big losses with no losses.
Thank you, Beth, for those comments and recognizing it's a, it's a, what, 35-minute presentation, and Mr. Bang and I have spent hours and hours. And again, also thank you to Stephen at Westbrook and their input, really helping us finalize and structurally get that budget together, and principals and everybody for input. Okay, no questions? And I think once somebody needs to move to approve the budget as presented, and again, noting that you all have the detail and all the tabs that provided this information for the overview.
All right, if nobody has any further questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2021-2022 budget.
So moved to approve the budget. This is Harriet.
All right, do I hear a second?
I'll second. This is Mike.
All right, motion second. Any discussion, comments, questions?
I just like to say that the presentation I thought Jackie did was excellent. I think it's just like the MBang's Zoom has been really good on our presentation skills here. I like the way MBang does his meetings, and I really think the presentation of everything was very good.
Thank you.
This one I'll give the credit to Jackie. Jackie's a technician now.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I echo that. It's
Yeah, and
a long way.
with all the tabs, the spreadsheet with all the tabs with all that detail was just, having that in advance too was just amazing.
Good.
Yeah, we've come a long way from 2 or 3 years ago when we used to get printed handouts at board meetings. So with really tiny font and spreadsheet that.
Well, it's still tiny font spreadsheets.
Well, at least we can zoom in though.
That's right.
When I first arrived, you don't get a report. You just have an oral report. That's what I
Oh, that's right.
used to have.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, I'll entertain the vote on the motion in a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? Hearing none. All right, the budget is approved.
Right.
All right, thank you, everyone. There's nothing else on our agenda. Thank you very much, Jackie, for everything, and Mr. Mbang and the rest of the staff. I know the last week has been really hard, and the last school year in general has been difficult. So kudos to you guys for fighting through it. So hopefully the next year will be a lot smoother and more enjoyable as we go forward.